Now, before we move on to the next part of the overview of contrastive linguistics, do you have any questions, comments, or feedback on the contents that we discussed last time about the different fields of linguistics and also their branches? Now, just a very quick overview. What are the three big, branches of linguistics? General linguistics, descriptive, and comparative linguistics. Good. And what are the sub-branches of comparative linguistics? Yeah. Comparative historical, typology, and contrastive linguistics. So what is the name of the course we are doing this term? Contrastive linguistics. And what is the difference between contrastive linguistics and comparative linguistics? Can you explain? What's your name? Chúc. Mean Chúc, right? Good. He's very active on the online work, and that's how he knows that. Yeah. So contrastive linguistics is about comparing usually two languages only for practical purpose at a certain point. While comparative linguistics is a term that is about all of the work relating to comparing one or more languages together. Another quiz. English and French in the same language branch? No. So which language is closer to English? German. Oh, good. You know that? In German is closer to English. By the way, have you spent time trying to find the answer to the question I raised last time about the origin of Vietnamese and Chinese? Do those two languages come from the same origin? No, we haven't done anything about that yet. Keep thinking about that. Right. But the history of contrastive linguistics, it dates back to thousands of years ago. And if you have already done the introductions from Professor Lemon Kim and Professor Bùi Hùng, you will see that contrastive linguistics was perhaps the first science of language come up before any other sciences about language. Around the 4th century BC, so it was 2,500 years ago, there was already a grammar book on Canonical grammar. Canonical grammar is the earliest contrastive linguistic work that compare and contrast classical Sanskrit and some other Indian languages. Now, if you connect this to your understanding about history, India used to be a blooming culture during the ancient time, and when most of the world was still in darkness, while the Western world, even China, was in darkness, the Indian culture had a very rich, very high level in medical science, in social studies, and even in martial arts. The first university of the world was set to be established in India 4,000 years ago. And at that time, scholars from China, from Middle East, and from Europe would come to India to study about law, to study about medical studies, and philosophy, and of course, religion. Now, later on, in the medieval time, there were also some grammar books in European languages comparing and contrasting Greek or Latin with their own languages, especially during the time of the Roman Empire, and even after the Roman Empire collapsed. Now, when did the Roman Empire collapse? Does anybody know? Come on. You must read a little bit about the history of the United Kingdom. Which century? Is it in the 10th century? Now, the Roman Empire collapsed around the 4th and the 5th century AD. Okay? And during the Roman Empire, time, Greek or Latin were like English nowadays. It was the lingua franca, international language, the language for scholars, the language for the academic world. And at this time, when people learn a foreign language, it is usually about learning Greek or Latin. And this is also the root of grammar translation methods. And you have already learned in English language teaching methodology. Okay. Now, so from these evidence, we can say that the present contrastive linguistics that we are learning today is the result of thousands of research on languages, especially for language teaching and language learning. Now, so after the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe were in darkness for a while, and then came the Renaissance period when almost every field sprang up into bright light, and contrastive linguistics started to take root during this time from Europe. Around the early 11th century, there was a book called Grammatica by Alfred, and this is a contrastive analysis between English and Latin. It is a very important assumption that the author of the book raised. That is, when you understand one language, it helps you to learn another language better, especially when the two languages belong to the same language family. For example, French people usually spend only 2 or 3 years in order to reach proficient level in English. But for Vietnamese, usually 5 to 10 years, or the whole life. It's the same story with Chinese. For Vietnamese, writing Chinese is difficult, but it used to be easy when we still use the Chinese scripting system. It was easier, but now because our handwriting systems are completely different, actually I have almost forgotten all of the Chinese characters that I learned several years ago. But I can still speak Chinese when I need, right? So for Vietnamese, learning to speak Chinese is much easier than learning to speak other languages like French or English. So this is the key point I will raise in this book. And this is also the foundation for contrastive studies that we are going to explore for the whole semester. When you understand one language well, it will facilitate, it will help you to learn another language better. Now, in the 17th century, John Hui made another groundbreaking, assumption, and this is also the key argument for contrastive linguistics that we work on nowadays. That is, when you learn another language, there will be positive and negative transfer from your mother tongue. So your native language can, both help and hinder the learning acquisitions of another language. And this is somehow like an upgrade from the previous assumptions made in Grammatica by Alfred. There can be beneficial effects, and there can be also harmful effects. Now, some of you here are learning French, and I think you can agree with me that sometimes you make mistakes in learning French because of your English. That's true. And that is exactly what this point is about. Knowing another language can make and also break your language learning. So the point of doing contrastive linguistic study is to minimize the negative transfer while maximize the positive transfer. The later researchers like Paul, Louis, Cole, and their publications, the title of their publications are all on the slide. You see here. They raise the same point of view when they compile grammar books for teaching European languages. Now, in the 18th century, James Whitworth was the first person ever to use the term contrast when referring to all of these linguistic stuff. And 1789, there was a year of publication, and then the name Contrastive Linguistics started to be used from this time. So we see that for thousands of years before the publications of James Bickel's work, contrastive analysis of languages was done usually intuitively, doing everything with the hunch of the researcher. You just write and make inventory about languages in the way you feel appropriate. There are no methodology, there are no principles, guideline principles for doing the analysis. And in order for something to call a subject or an area of study, there need to be three important things. There need to be the object of study. Of course, all of the previous work point to the several objects, but they were all about teaching and learning a new language. Right? Now, the second thing that is necessary for a science to be separate from the other is that it needs to have its own conceptual framework and methodology, the guiding principle. So, contrastive linguistics did not become an independent field of study in languages until the 20th century, when a full framework for analyzing languages with clear-cut principles was formed. Now, there was not much research on contrastive linguistics during the first part of the 20th century. But after World War II, there were boom, especially in the Western bloc, boom in business exchange, boom in culture exchange between America and Europe. And at that time, there was a strong need to study language pairs like English and French, English and German, English and Italian. The Soviet Union at that time also spent a vast amount of money on studying language pairs like Russians and Chinese, Russians and Vietnamese, Russians and Oriental languages in order to build translation machines. Now, so Google Translate that we are using nowadays started after World War II. It was initially a project to do automatic translation between American English and several European languages. And the Soviet Union had a similar project. And in order to make those projects work, obviously it has a lot to do with contrastive analysis, contrastive study. Now, the contrastive analysis works up until this time was still very much biased. I mean, the views about languages were strongly influenced by what we call Eurocentric views. I mean, taking Europe as a center, they tend to view other languages in the world as being similar, or having the same rules and structure like those in Europe. And last time we talked a little bit about problems in grammar and how problematic it can become when describing whether in Vietnamese basic sentence patterns we have verbs or adjectives, right? So that's the problem, okay? About the influence from Eurocentric. Sept, in his book published in 1983, was the first linguist to bring up a complete picture of contrastive linguistics worldwide. And according to Sept, contrastive linguistics worldwide can be categorized into 3 language schools. And these are the 3. Now, the first language school that was very influential in Vietnam nowadays in the Eastern Europe school. In the Eastern Europe school, there were very famous Praha groups of linguists. And both Professor Kun and Professor Leontin K from this language school, they did their PhD in contrastive linguistics in Slovakia and in Czech Republic. Now, the guru or the key figure for the Eastern European language school is both the Kutini and he's a Polish. Poland. Now, okay, in the early 20th century, 1902, he already suggested a kind of contrastive analysis that did not take into account language family and language typology. And then this kind of views of analysis is later promoted in order to describe languages as they are, without being influenced by the other views of European languages. Now, until later, he did a lot of work comparing and contrasting Eastern European languages and Russian languages. The publications and the work that were developed by Woodin later were developed by other linguists. And together they form a language school called the Praha language school. And if you read, foundational linguistics, even in Vietnamese, probably you will hear the name of the Praha language school. Now, in Russia, during the 20th century, there was also many contrastive linguistic works comparing Russian and neighboring languages. Please recall that during the first half of the 20th century, the Soviet Union was very big and was very strong, and there was many different ethnic communities speaking different languages living together, and there was also a strong demand from the central government to make sure that languages of all those communities are taken into account in the national language policy. For the Western Europe school, Charles Barley is the key figure, and I can see a lot of entries about Charles Barley in your glossaries already. those entries provide you lots of good information about him. Charles Bartley is a Swiss, and he did a lot of contrastive analysis work comparing and contrasting French and German. Now, his famous work was this book, Linguistique générale et linguistique française. Now, these are the other important works from the Western European language school. As you can see, it was mainly about comparing and contrasting popular Western languages. So, like stylistique comparée du français et de l'anglais. Right? So, and you can translate that for yourself using the context that we have learned in English. Comparative statistics between French and English. Stylistique comparée du français et de l'allemand. German. Now, another book that was very famous, published in 1961 by Bob, was Recherches sur la fréquence et la valeur des parties du discours en français, en anglais et en espagnol. Can you translate it into English for yourself? Yeah, research about the frequency and the value of particles in discourse in French, English, and Spanish. Okay, so these are the famous contrastive linguistic words from the Western European language school. Now, the American language school was very influential during the 20th century with lots of very big names like Chomsky, and for contrastive linguistics, Charles Fry was a very famous applied linguist in America. He had a lot of publications that try to apply the researches from contrastive linguistics into language teaching and learning, especially teaching and learning English. Now, if you connect this to the context in America, you will see that there are lots of different communities living in America. For example, the Vietnamese community there is very big. How many Vietnamese now live in the United States? Roughly about how many? Yeah, now it's nearly 2 million. And they, you know, and they settle down. They are mostly in the West Coast. And there was also a very exciting communities of Chinese, Japanese, Mexicans, Cubans, and in Florida and in Miami, and lots of other communities. So that's the motivation and also the pressure on the government to cross linguistic studies. Now, Charles Fry in a very famous book on teaching and learning English as a foreign language made this point. And this is a guideline for developing language teaching materials nowadays. The most efficient materials are those that are based upon scientific description of the language to be learned, carefully prepared with a parallel description of the native language of the learner. And this is also the reason why, in order to teach languages in primary school, middle school, and high school in Vietnam now, we do not, import textbooks from Oxford, from Cambridge, publishers. There are always a group of experts in material design, in language teaching, working together in order to combine those materials. And of course, the practical teaching context in Vietnam is taken into account. The differences, the negative transfer, the positive negative transfer between Vietnamese and English are also taken into account. To be sure, when we teach English to Vietnamese, usually we do not focus much on telling the difference between ta and da. Because in Vietnamese language, those two sounds are distinct, and it's very easy for students to tell the difference. Now, in many European languages, it's very hard for the learner to tell the difference between ta and da. And if you learn French, you see that sometimes there is a confusion between those two sounds, like a nom, om, nom, dom. Sometimes, and because those two sounds come from the same, place of articulation and have similar manner of articulation, right? Da, da. But in our textbooks, we do not spend much time teaching those two, those two sounds, because those two sounds are not problematic for Vietnamese. But instead, we need to focus on sounds like sh and sh, like shu, seashore, for example. Or sounds that do not exist in our language. Right. So this is the point that was accepted widely in curriculum design and in language teaching. In order to teach a language efficiently, the material should be built up with reference to the study of differences between the tacit language and the monotype. Now, there are several other famous linguists in the American school that you should know for your oral presentation. Now, linguistics across culture is a very big word, comparing and contrasting nearly 10 languages by Lado and serves as the foundation for many for compiling many dictionaries later. Transfer grammar is by Chase article published in 1954, and it focused on the possible negative and positive transfer from one language to the other. Languages in context, I'm sorry for this spelling mistake there, by Waiter, was published in 1953, and this book discusses the cultural differences in languages. For example, when you think about the pronoun systems in Vietnamese, it can be problematic even for the native speaker. And it has a lot to do with the culture of Vietnamese, in which age has a lot of value in social interactions, right? And also family relationship has big count in social interaction. Now, so the contrastive linguistics was very influential, powerful after World War II, especially with the rise of audio-lingual language methodology at that time. And what is the focus of AOM, audio-lingual teaching method? Is it on form or on meaning? Yeah. Are you sure? Hey, you are going to be like a teacher very soon. And those are, you must know, in the audiolingual, will you focus on form or will you focus on meaning? Are you sure? You are not confident, you know. Yeah, but you are right. In audiolingual, there was a lot of drills, repetition to make sure that the student learn all the forms. And it was very mechanical. It did not take much into account the part of the meaning. And when you compare structures, rules, sound, languages together, you are doing contrastive analysis. Subconsciously. Even though you do not refer to the monotype. Now, later on, people see that there was not much value in comparing and contrasting language structures together. And also sometimes, when you come with language pairs that are so different in language structure, there's not much value in comparing and contrasting those pairs. For example, when you do a contrastive analysis between English and Vietnamese, it's very hard for you to choose a good topic if you work on grammar. You can compare kinds of text, for example, negative form or affirmative form, or present form. But no analysis, will not have much language learning and language teaching. But if you choose topics on higher levels of linguistics, macro-linguistics like sociolinguistics or discourse analysis, you will see that there are lots of interesting topics that you can explore. And those topics will be further discussed when we come to the different levels of analysis later on in this term. Now, so right after World War II, contrastive linguistics were very powerful, influential, together with the rise of the audio-lingual teaching method. But later on, when people shift the focus of language teaching and learning from form to meaning, then lots of the guidelines and the principles and the rules for contrasting and compare languages cannot apply. Now, to make the matter worse, the machine translation project started by the American government was failure during the 70s and the 80s, despite billions of dollars spent on that project. Now, during the 1950s, lots of people believed that soon we would not need translators, we would not need the language teachers, because computers can do all those automatic translations for human beings, based on the contrastive analysis work of different language pairs. And the both the Soviet Union and the American government spent lots of money on building up machines together with linguistic databases that had automatic translation. The result, you put in language and you get garbage out. That's what they say. So there was distrust, there was disappointment about the prospects of promoting contrastive linguistics, and it was in serious, crisis during the 60s and 70s. You can read the history of contrastive linguistics. It had changed. And later on, he makes some defensive arguments about the values of studying contrastive linguistics. Right. So I was told by the very old professor in our department that before the liberation of the South, the teacher training curriculum in this university had several, credits for teaching contrastive linguistics. Then during the 1980s, 1990s, contrastive linguistics were removed from the teacher training curriculum. Then at the end of the 1990s, and later, during the early 2000s, the Ministry of Education and Training made contrastive linguistics a must in the training curriculum of all foreign languages, whether you do French, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, English. You have to learn contrastive linguistics. Why? Because there has been growing demand again for comparing and contrasting linguistics. And with the failure of the linguistic project that was done previously, now people do not expect as much, but they know the value of comparing and contrasting languages. And that's why we have very good Google translation machine nowadays. Now, let me tell you one secret. Not very long ago, I got an email from a French professor, and because I can read French, I understand everything he writes there. But of course, to be able to read French is very different from to be able to write a reply in French. So, and then at that time, there was no staff in the Department of International Cooperation that could do French translations. That staff was, on work leave. So I turned to Google Translation. I type all of my replies in English and copy all those replies, paste in Google Translate, and then click Translate to French, and then send to the professor. The next day, he gave me a huge compliment on my French, and not knowing that I use automatic translation machine. So I strongly suggest you to challenge Google Translation now. Sometimes they do a better job with translation than human beings. Why? Because we are now moving toward the third generation of World Wide Web. In the third generation of World Wide Web, there are combinations of machines, powerful machines, very fast connection bandwidth, and real human intelligence. The more you use Google Translation, the more intelligent you become. Because each time you put in a translation, and then they give you the outcome, you are not happy with the outcome, you make some changes on Google Translation, it records those changes. It remembers those changes that were made by human beings. And because there are millions of people using Google Translation every day, it incorporates all those changes into this database. And next time when you type in a key concept or when you put in a text, it knows right away what translation should be suggested. Very powerful. Now, so that's an account for the revived interest of contrastive linguistics. Now, in the current context, there is even a stronger demand for cross-cultural studies. Now, as students in this department, we have chance to travel to Japan, and we have chances to travel to Korea. Every year, we have several students joining the student exchange programs there, and similarly, we are going to have the same exchange program with Thailand. Numerous of students will come to Thailand, and also Thai students will come to help to study. Now, what I mean is that in the current context of the 20th century, the world is much flatter, and they boom in the business exchange, in academic exchange, and especially in the internet, making a lot of changes by breaking down barriers across cultures. So there is a stronger and stronger interest in building up an automatic translation project, in helping people from different languages communicating with each other. And that's account for in part account for the revived interest in learning about other languages. And when you learn another language, there is always a strong demand to find out the best way, or the most efficient way to learn. Right? So contrastive linguistics was one of those solutions. And when developed language materials, as I have already explained, differences between the Thai language and the modern tongue need to be taken into account. And personally, I hate to use the Chinese textbook or Vietnamese that do not take into account the differences. When I learned vocabulary, because 30 years ago I taught myself Chinese, I did not go to language school because I did not have time. But some of the vocabulary were translated in a way that take away the positive transfer. For example, 国际 is translated into cầu nước or cầu quốc. Now, if it is translated into quốc tình or Vietnamese, it's much easier for us to learn, right? Right? And that's just one example. When I was in the United States, one day the grandma, she was Chinese and I told you about last time. She's told me this thing with completely new vocabulary. 今天晚上我们去教会去玩饭好吧 And I have never learned that word, 教会. Yeah, 教会. But I know 教 here, similar to 教授, giáo sư. And 会 in hội. So 教会 should be giáo hội. And 教会 it should be translated into giáo hội first. Yeah, to have Vietnamese learner to learn that word more easily. When I turn to a textbook teaching Chinese, I translate 教会 into nhà thờ, nhà chùa, or something like that. Of course, that's correct, and that's good translation. But subconsciously, it removes the positive transfer. That is very beneficial for Vietnamese learning Chinese. You see the point?
And maybe they want to raise the international cost
Here's another term, for example. Not very long ago, I had to translate a book on grammatology. Grammatology is not about grammar. It's about, and when you look that term up in monolingual dictionary, the definition is the act of writing. So how do you translate that into Vietnamese? Grammatology. Like we have a pen here. No, it's not about grammar. It is it. Now, because for the art of writing, you cannot translate into viết học, right? It's about how to write beautifully, how to express yourself clearly, and how to have good handwriting at the same time. You cannot translate it into something like nét và viết. Well, that's a very good translation. I agree. Very good translation. You know, but I come to a solution. I look this up in English Chinese dictionary, and in Chinese, it was translated into Wen, Zhi, Sui. So literally, when you translate it into Vietnamese, Văn tự học, it fits, and it's a very good term. And it lessons here is about văn, the literature is about thực, about the handwriting, văn tự học. And I spent a lot of time learning Chinese simply for translating new concepts, new ideas. For example, now we have heard a lot about a new area in linguistics called ngôn ngữ học chi nhận, cognitive linguistics. Originally, we were at a stuck about how to translate those concepts. When you translate it into something like ngôn ngữ học thần kinh, ngôn ngữ học tư duy, it sounds some sort of bland and very, very off. And then we did the same thing. We looked the concept up in English Chinese dictionary. It was vấn trì giảng dạy sẽ nhận chi ngôn ngữ học. And then changing order a little bit, make it chi nhận, so that the order of the word is more similar to the now order in. Okay, so let's go back to this. So there was a strong demand in the 20th century for doing business, for learning other languages, and especially for designing language teaching materials that are appropriate for different language texts. Now, if you major in languages and later on you want to have publication in international journals, there are numerous linguistic journals in contrastive linguistics, and these are the tops. Papers and studies in contrastive linguistics in Poland, Contrast, and that's French, contrastive linguistics in Bulgaria, and if you search in Google Books, contrastive linguistics, you can see hundreds of textbooks and journals relevant to the field. In Vietnam, contrastive linguistics rises again because of the debates on language teaching methodology, on text designing, on curriculum design. And people, they look to contrastive linguistics analysis as one of the solutions. And the first national conference on contrastive linguistics was organized in 1997, and it was maintained up to now. Every year, it is organized around the May Day on the liberation of the South, and it's the biggest event of the linguistic circle in Vietnam. Last year, it was in Hanoi. The year before that, it was in Frankfurt. So they train the convention venue every year. But this is considered as the biggest event. And the conference proceeding, they also consider as a journal in languages. I think we are about to start very soon. These are the discussion questions, and they are raised again in our learning system. I do not put all of these questions in our system, but basically, I want you to answer this in a journal. Why were cognitive contrastive linguistics in crisis during the 60s and 70s? And this question is the kickoff for your final essay. What are the major language families, and which language family the English belongs to, which language family the Vietnamese belongs to? You may try to find the answer to the origin of English and Chinese and Vietnamese. When looking at this picture. Now, this is also another important question when you describe Vietnamese. Explore the features of isolating languages. In the glossary, I have already seen your post about isolating languages, syntactic languages, and polysyntactic languages. So it's very helpful for you to come back to the glossary activity and read those explanations. Very easy. All right. So before I start, any questions and feedback about the history of contrastive linguistics? So, language teaching methodology, the kind of that you are doing now, is a branch of applied linguistics. And applied linguistics is a branch of the general linguistics. So, the study of language teaching methods, teaching techniques, and also seeing that you are looking on the language teaching methodology. I also consider as a branch of studying languages. When you graduate from this university, you have two ideas. You are a teacher and you are a linguist. Whether you like it or not. Right.